Well, hey y'all, I'm Luke Drago. I am the co-founder of Workshop Labs. We are a public benefit corp and AI research company with a mission to make people irreplaceable. And I can talk a bit at the end of what we mean by that. But I think the thing I'm here to talk about today is an essay I wrote about a year ago now, which is a bit insane, called The Intelligence Curse. And to get a sense of what I'm talking about, it might be helpful to think a little bit about the concept of the permanent underclass. Meme took off something like a year ago, and the idea was, all right, AI is going to make a few people extraordinarily wealthy, and what is it going to do to everyone else? And if you've read the news at all in the last 6 months, or if you talk to people outside of Silicon Valley, one of the things you've probably heard is that people aren't too excited about this AI things. People here are quite excited. There's a ton of opportunity and a ton of progress we can make. But when I go back to North Carolina, where I grew up, people were worried about two things. Called my sister about this last night, actually, and I then get asked in a kind of somewhat semi-serious tone, is AI going to kill everyone? And then I get asked in a much more serious tone, and is it going to take my job? And I think people are much more concerned about the likelihood of the latter in some cases, although I think the former is still absolutely worth addressing. I think if you take a look at why people are worried about this, it's actually just pretty intuitive. It looks like there's kind of two paths that Ian's taking with AI right now. And to really illustrate this, I've got the classic view formatted. My path is did you have this path is that. But there's two paths that give AI to take. One, where we build technologies that are genuinely empowering, you get this at what that means the best. And one, where we build technologies that are a bit more of the opposite. I think the kind of Silicon Valley meme of the age guy, the idea that builds a single giant system that does all meaningful economic work. In many cases, that tends to be something like, oh, we'll just get like nice AI pays for everything, a total abundance, doesn't that. I think this is a bit counterintuitive. When we talk about automation, I want to talk a bit about the idea of job loss. Job loss isn't just, oh, we do a little bit of displacement. The goal of the last couple of years of the automation has been, like I mentioned, AGI. The idea behind that being all meaningful economic work gets automated by a single system. And so that's not a world where we automate some tasks and then other tasks are left alone. It's not a world where we automate a little bit of work over time and then we automate some other work later. The goal of something like $1 trillion in capital has been aimed at automating everything. And automating everything doesn't just mean you lose your job. The bedrock of the economy and of civil society is this relationship between labor and capital, where because people are useful, people get rewarded and paid for these things. And if you look at the history of automation over the last, couple hundred years, kind of pre-post-industrial revolution, when technologies rewrite that social contract, the social contract can move in two different directions. It can move more favorably towards regular people or much worse for regular people. In the Industrial Revolution, we built technologies that were initially quite centralized. That centralized power in the hands of a couple of people, and that then made the individual people there quite interchangeable. There's only so many people lots of people can work on a factory, only so many people do specialized labor. But as the Industrial Revolution enabled additional decentralization, as electricity enabled factories to pop up everywhere, and as the kind of bedrock of the economy moved away from just being single production in factories to specialized goods, specialized labor, people got powerful again. And that's the same reason why today, a senior software engineer can go to Google and demand 18 cafes on site and demand a $300,000 salary because they're specialized labor. Google makes more money with them in the picture, and so Google really wants to compete for that worker. In a world where those tasks are off the table, where the labor that's left is interchangeable, that specialization is less important, and that people matter less, well, in that world, the incentive for these powerful people who have concentrated power, the people who own the frontier models, the people who own the compute, the people who own the data, to actually do the kind of grand UBI experiments that are always talked about are pretty low. And we don't have to look to, the far off future to think about this. We can just look to economies today that already exist and have factors like this. The intelligence curse might sound like kind of an ominous name, but it's actually named after a cold and dry concept in development economics called the resource curse, where states that have a resource as their predominant mode of production, they make a lot of oil, they have a lot of oil in the ground, they don't invest heavily in education, they don't invest heavily in building more schools.
They invest heavily instead in what it takes to get the oil out of the ground. And so even if these states have tons of money and have tons of power, they don't return that power back to their people. And because their people aren't involved in the production of that value, because very few people are required to get the oil out of the ground, the result ends up being that those people, for the rest of everyone else, does actually be a buffer. They aren't taking care of value after. They're just some rank GI. You've run this experiment in places that it didn't publish or after repression of Val 4. You've run it in a red public condo.
You even run it in the US inside of the Rust Belt in Appalachia. When the jobs leave, the incentives go down to do something else. And all we argue in The Intelligence Curse, my co-author and I, is that in a world where you could literally automate all labor, you get the exact same effect from that development econ, but just a bit stronger. And the result of that is that you, the people who don't necessarily own the frontier model weights and don't own the compute that's powering the frontier model weights, you matter a little bit less. Both, you're probably not employed, and you're probably not nearly as powerful. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters for a couple of reasons. In this kind of status quo social contract that we have, there's a relationship between these kind of powerful actors, the states, the governments, corporations, and the regular people. And they need you for value, and this gives you power to display stuff. Governments need people to get things done. Companies need people to get things done. And because they need people, those people deserve those sheets. And the more they need those people, the more bargaining power they have. And the result is that both people and powerful actors constrain and write the rules that constrain each other. It's a relationship that shifted. In feudal society, the relationship much more dominated by powerful actors. Post-industrialization, much more dominated by regular people. And it varies country to country, place to place. But this is what we mean by the social contract. This thing that's constantly renegotiated and rewritten. But if you have AI that hit you literally at, and that's the all you've aimed at, well, it's not as good. It's not as good for regular. Powerful actors don't need those people for the production of value. There's no reason to spend $150,000 or $300,000 or $1,000 or $1 million on an army of people when GPT-5 or GPT-7 or whatever it is can do it for 10x less and about 10x faster. There's no reason to. And so because of that, your relationship there is harder to negotiate. I mean, think about what's happening, even in like regular recessions where when the labor market gets bad, your ability to negotiate for a higher salary is just much worse. But imagine that at the extreme. This wouldn't be a problem if we weren't actually concerned that something like total automation could be coming. But if you listen to the leaders of the frontier labs, Dario is saying something like we could see 20% white-collar unemployment in the next 5 or 6 years. Economists at the Bureau of Economic Research had a paper out as is Kordak in 2024, where they argue that in an AGI-like scenario, the thing you get basically overnight is wage collapse. So surely someone's going to work on this, right? Surely. Well, the problem is a lot of the incentives for those powerful actors go down. They don't need to worry about it as much. It's not as important for them to fix the problem because they're winning the benefits. We call this resource capture in the resource curse of literature, where the guys who are making the oil money don't really care what happens everywhere else. It's not their job to care. And when I've spoken with, everyone from members of Congress to, people at the regular companies, none of them seem to know what to do. And that's because fundamentally this isn't a policy problem, it's a technology problem. The question that we get as a room filled with, among other things, builders, is what kind of world we're going to build. And are we going to aim for technologies that replace us and knock us out of the picture? Or are we going to aim for technologies that do something a little different? The fun part about this, though, is there are technologies that you can build. And I don't think any of these technologies in isolation solve the problem. But I think combined, the question for us today is can we build technologies that are competitive with full automation, but that also keep people relevant, that make people irreplaceable. And we argue in the paper there's 3 ways to be this, kind of a tiered list. You probably want to avert the biggest risks from AI. Those risks are both that in and of themselves, and those risks make it harder to centralize technology. And the kind of simple third point here, the entire strategy is I refuse to ask capabilities. And not the kind of like crazy, Margaret stands for humans to a loop, but they don't actually matter. But today, humans and AIs were genuinely working together in ways that are more powerful. People will call this extending the center of period.
And then finally, to build technology to make it easier for policymakers to democratize control of AI. So first, I guarantee you avert those major risks. Second, you put AI's power in hands. And third, you then democratize control over it, make it easier for people to exercise their pride and legitimacy over these. What does that look like? On the averting side, there's a whole lot you can do to make the world safe for advanced AI. So
As everything from reducing bio risk. This is probably the single biggest misuse issue from like extremely powerful AI. And this is everything from biosecurity evals to KYC to DNA synthesis screening to vaccine production. And as a side note, if you're a builder building near or at the frontier of AI capabilities, getting evals for this kind of stuff is not that hard. As a company, we're undergoing a biosecurity eval right now, and we realized we need to do this a couple days before a launch, and we're able to get a hold of the best experts on this in literally 24 hours. So there's an ecosystem that already supporting Node in this space, that's both working in Node's other categories, and that's working to reduce the fundamental risk. And I think it's one that's critically important. There's work on AI alignment, and I think everyone in the room has heard about alignment. I don't want to highlight it too much. But there's work on AI alignment and the related technology, everything from interp to more technical methods, to keep models robustly under human control. There's cybersecurity, one of the biggest threat vectors that will enable people to stop the diffusion of AI and hand regular people, to keep it centralized. Is because AI does pose a massive cybersecurity risk. There's lots of vulnerable code that's never been hacked into because you haven't had the easy abilities. Relatively shortly, all code-related activity for an agent to go and steal, or an agent to go and break into. And so work here on formal verification of code, on refactoring and secure code, all of this is quite important. And finally, on AI control, which is different than AI alignment. AI alignment says we align the models they own down our control, and control work that goes, and they do without our control, what do we use to stop that? And if you can accomplish these and related objectives, you make it safe for mass diffusion. And so instead of a couple of trusted actors who argue they need to have all power, you have hundreds of tens of thousands of actors, even more, each developing powerful models, all the energy available. As diffusion capabilities just like ports. So how do you diffuse it? It's a separate question. Because diffusing doesn't just look like giving everyone a subscription to ChatGPT. I think this is kind of the way that the big labs are treating it. And the reason they're doing that is because it also just increases their log warrant. What diffusion needs here is that the actual elements that go into the production and use of the models are controlled by more and more people. As part of this looks like augmentation of overall automation. You want to build a system that spin the centaur period. And we'll have some more comments the evals for bringing up in a couple of days, or a couple of weeks now, I guess, to measure how a model is evaluated, or is a human supposed to automate that. We're working on that now. I have a mission to work on this. I think the kind of dream of they add agents to do everything, both is for sure, and also just not the one on sci-fi. And of course, sci-fi models that work on psyche. Decentralization then is the critical part, and this is part of why securing your beforehand is so important. Because you want to decentralize basically every layer of the stack. You want to use as many hands as possible. You want people to equalize for their data. You want to train to be decentralized. There's companies doing great work on this right now. Premier Elect, for example, has gone a whole lot to decentralize training, make any way possible for anyone to have a frontier labs in their backyard. Our Sky, we are giving money to open source under Drago firm called KVK2 which is the best class model that 50s open source speed up. Session they will use more people to train post-break models that are rewarding voluntary capabilities. And the more models that go through it to build the billions of models that goes to tens or hundreds, the more people are in control of different models and the more they're likely to win. On a privacy side, data is the biggest bottleneck to automation, in particular high-quality task data. And there's lots of companies that are doing everything they can to gobble up that data as fast as possible to get it off the people who already generate this. The promise of frontier privacy, training models privacy, asserting policy privacy, is that people could put their data to work without handing over their data to big labs that use it against them, who don't use that data to train the next model that it automates them to. And this is true both at the enterprise level and at the individual user level. The more data is diffused, the more control of data is diffused, the more people still matter. And finally, user alignment here, which is different than just the general concept of can we align models, but can we align models to individual users? Can we have a model that is robustly acting in the interest of one person, that works like them, alongside them, that can represent them when they're not there? This could significantly increase an individual's ability to both get things done, to be represented in the broader society, to negotiate deals and contracts that otherwise they might be getting screwed on. And fine, sure, maybe the other guys have bigger, more powerful AIs, but I'd rather grow up with my own AI than without one. So I think the promise of aligning models to users is probably one of the most exciting ones for genuinely diffusing the technology so that it actually matters. You want to know the model that you're using is actually in your best interest and working alongside you. And then finally, you probably want to talk about democratizing control and putting AI direction in regular people's hands. So this is both technology problem and policy problem. If we've done everything right, step 1 and 2, we'd end up in a world with lots of AI and lots of people have won. But this very parenting is that 1 and 2 happen, we're still in a possible unequal world than today. We're still in a world where we expanded the number of hospitals in AI. A lot of people happens. Because to be honest, a lot of people aren't only egoistically centralized computers, and they aren't going to have the data needed to train their arms. And so we don't just want to bring the people who are already at the frontier ahead. We don't just want to expand the circle of winners from a couple hundred to a couple million. We want to make sure everyone gets across the finish line of the AI revolution. And that requires making sure that people can robustly control it, even when it's against the interest of everyone, of model providers and creators. The problem, though, is that the intelligence curse's probably most pernicious effect, and we see this in resource afflicted states, is that it eats democracy substantially. Democracies are built on a foundation of diffuse capital. There's a reason why the Magna Carta urged that England, a place where the weak can control and lots of lords, and not in Spain, where they're the stronger one. When you have this diffuse capital, you have to settle disputes, and that means you build courts, and then you end up setting up parliaments. And if you cut out that diffuse capital, if you concentrate wealth in the hands of a few people, well, the interest of governments becomes serving those people who are paying the tax base and not in serving everyone else. So robustifying democracy is one of the most important things here. I don't know if you've checked recently, but democracy isn't looking that strong this week or this month or this year. It's had a rough, I think, 2 decades according to Freedom House. It's been a rough ride for democracy. And it is both because democracy has been distrusted and because technologies we built have weakened the trust that we have in democracy. We can strengthen that. We can do it in a couple ways. 1, we can build pro-democracy tech. And what I mean by here is tech that makes it easier for democracies to work. Things like preference aggregation, voting tools, even in some ways prediction markets that help make it clear to politicians what outcomes of decisions might be. All of these things can make it easier for democracies to function. You also probably want something like human verification, as private as possible. I think World has done some really interesting work here. But you want to be able to prove that when you're in the voting booth in 20 years, or when politicians are reacting to Twitter, something else happens. And finally, you want to build coordination technology and better information environments. AI negotiation, contract enforcement, AI better extended tools, internet laws. You want it so people know the decisions they're making and can make those decisions together. The thing I'll leave you with is that we don't have to live in a world where people are sociable. We don't have to build technology that erases people. We can build a technology that makes people irreplaceable. That's not a lofty vision. It's not an impossible one. We've been doing pretty well for the last couple thousand years. I think we can keep doing it if we choose to build something differently. And I think the window is wide open for different opportunities and options. So as you build today, and as you work on, whether you're doing the hackathon or going back into a company, I think you should work on making people irreplaceable. Thank you.